Shall we begin?
You are now listening to an altogether less fashionable variety of soccer podcast. Broadcasting live from the capital city of Columbus, Ohio. Welcome to
ACES Radio.
I got the new wings with the Zima flavor sauce.
I've given this no thought whatsoever.
Hashtag probably riding cock.
They're in your face. They're a little different. I think it's super cool. I love them. Jamie, ignorant slut.
Hold on to your butts.
Now, here are your hosts.
Not Morgan Hughes. Rest.
John Zadar. And Darby Snarpus.
No!
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to ACES Radio. This is our check-in show. We said when we brought the show to a halt about a month or so ago that we would get back in touch around the beginning of end of May, beginning of June. So this is us doing that. Darby's here with me today. How you doing, Darby?
Hey, thank you, John. I am super glad to be here. Taken a little bit of a hiatus in which I've watched the world catch on fire. How are you doing?
Yeah, all things considered, I'm hanging in there. I'll just say that. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily doing great or good or anything positive, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah, we left. So when we left, we were in only the coronavirus world at that point. We were all basically in lockdown, and we had been in kind of self-imposed quarantine for a while now. The world is starting to open up back up. Whether or not that's a great idea is certainly debatable, but now we have another societal upheaval going on. So just when you thought maybe like things were going to go back to normal, we realized, oh yeah, there's a lot of shitty things in the world today, and so there's that, and that's great.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I for my part, I'm healthy as much as I ever have been, to be fair. It's not like I'm not out there running marathons, and much like some people, my beer tabs when I get alcohol from the store continue to be higher than they were before all this going on, although perhaps with the lack of tailgating I'm probably breaking even.
Yeah, it's funny because I've never really been a big home drinker. I don't sit around my house by myself and have beers and stuff like that usually, but over the last couple months I have definitely been putting my fair share away. Yeah,
and it when you have the sort of built-in, I don't want to say excuse, but you're like, oh, when I buy a case of hard seltzer from Seven Sun, I'm supporting a local business.
Right.
Not paying attention to the fact that case disappeared a lot faster than I would have necessarily expected.
Yeah, I know. I grab a 6-pack of CBC or something, and next thing I know, like, it's gone. It's only been like a few hours. It hasn't even made it till tomorrow, Darby.
No, right? I have realized, like, if I'm going to be running some Dungeons and Dragons things, I probably can't drink as much as I did as a player, so that'll help a bit.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be too wasted when you're in charge of things.
Yeah. Just so keep it in mind, when we were playing, if I ever did anything stupid, it was probably because I was one beer too many into the process.
Ah, see, that makes so much more sense now. As a non-drinker during D&D, I was just always enjoying water, and you're over here pounding beers. Okay. Darby's getting wasted on Sunday evenings,
Hey, like you do.
Hey, we all relieve the stress in different ways, so I judge you not. But what do you want to talk about first?
Well, did you want to talk at all about your experiences going to like the protests and stuff, or do you want
to? We can. Let's dive into that later when we kind of touch. I know we're going to touch on the teams and players in the league, kind of. Speaking out about it and getting involved in it. We can share our personal experiences then if we want. Let's maybe keep it all contained, but
that works.
I think the first thing we have listed here, which we can just go ahead and get out of the way because it's pretty inconsequential, all things considered, was that we wanted to follow up with the step challenge because we never got to finish covering that because we ended the show before they wrapped up and posted the final standings. So we just wanted to touch on that and talk about that a little bit real quick and acknowledge it. Let me read off the final leaderboard for that, which at this point is old news. Team Aiden was the team that ended up winning. They logged over 19 million steps, 19,015,381. Team Frankie came in second there with 18,718,512 steps. Team Dante came in third with 16,474,330 steps. And then I'm just going to rattle off the remainder here. You don't get to hear the steps if you want to see them. Maybe we'll tweet out a link to the leaderboard. But it was Team Sebastian in fourth, Team Federico in fifth, Team JT in sixth, Team Miguel in seventh, Team Jason in eighth, Team Clive in ninth, Team Brooke in 10th, and then bringing up the rear, Team Kelly in 11th. And then, Darby, I know you were able to find and look up what you thought was the inevitable prize that was handed out.
Yeah, it's possible. They tweeted out a picture. It appears the prize may have been a T-shirt, a 30-day step challenge champion T-shirt. If anybody who was involved and was on the winning team wants to let us know if they did other things, like, cool. We did realize in retrospect, since apparently a shit ton of people signed up for this thing, and also, as I think we discussed in the last episode, there's maybe not a great way to sort of filter out the people who are really working at it versus people who signed up and then didn't really do much. So a T-shirt might just be a nice across-the-board option for that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think that's kind of what I was expecting prize-wise, especially now that we know that it was like almost 1,000 people were supposedly participating. So
yeah, there were a ton of you out there. Not me. My lazy ass did not do this, but for those of you who did, there were quite a few.
Yeah, so I think a T-shirt makes total sense if you assume that everybody was divided evenly. I mean, it's like 100 people per team almost. So they're definitely not going to be like giving out jerseys or anything like that. So, did you want to share some of those like stats that we were looking at earlier?
Sure. Yeah. The team also released a by the numbers related to the steps challenge. So in total, the step challenge featured 152 million steps, logged them, and that's just what officially got caught, because some people did forget to log their steps in, but even just at the 152 million point, that was 76,000 miles, or enough to go around the Earth 3 times. The highest single stepper logged 904,000 steps, which translates to about 450 miles, which John and I were doing our back of the paper math. That's somebody who logged essentially 15 miles per day every day for the 30 days, which is a shit ton.
If they did that for real, I'm very impressed, but I have some legitimate doubts about that.
That feels like maybe a professional runner, perhaps, at that point, if that was a thing.
Yeah.
The person with the single day highest step count was 60,000 steps. That is a 30-mile day. That's more than a marathon.
Yeah.
Again,
it's pretty crazy.
Whoever did that, like, good for you, because that's a professional athlete level thing.
Did they release, not that I necessarily want you to say the names, but did they release the names for these people? Like, we know that there were literally professional athletes on some of these teams. Like, could these stats perhaps have been those people?
Yeah, the top 3 people, their names are listed here. They don't list the person who did the single day 60,000 steps.
I'm just picturing Dante, almost fully nude, just down to his short shorts, just running interstates around rural, the rural
Basically
fields of
laps.
Ohio. Yeah, just like
running the outer belt 15, 20 times.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so those are some pretty big numbers. So congratulations to everybody who took part, whether you did 904,000 steps or whether you did 9,000 steps that you weren't going to do otherwise. That's a good thing. So congratulations.
Yeah. I think that's important to keep in mind. Is like the point of this was not like necessarily to win, although that is a fun extra like bit of competition to it. But the point was just to make sure that you were getting up and getting out and moving around and getting some exercise in a time when it would have been very, very easy for you to just spend all your time sitting around the house. So I think if you did anything at all, just like you said, Darby, if you only logged a handful of miles here and there, those are probably maybe miles you wouldn't have logged otherwise. So you should be happy and proud about that. So good job.
Yeah.
All right. And speaking of getting up and working it out, the league and players finally came to an agreement on the new CBA this past week. Do you want to chat about that for a little bit? We can kind of go through some of the details of it. I'm interested to hear what your take is on it, Darby.
Sure. Yeah. So, for background, for anybody who hasn't been watching or hasn't looked at the details, the league and the players basically had an agreement in place back in February before all of this started.
Mm-hmm.
They had what they were calling an agreement in principle, which means neither side had officially ratified it, but they had basically agreed on all the terms. And then the world went to shit, and neither side wound up ratifying that existing agreement. Which in retrospect, depending upon your perspective, if you're on the league side, it was probably a good thing. And if you're on the player side, it kind of sucks. So basically what happened is they came back to the table, and I think functionally they were using the existing framework as a starting point for negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
In the original CBA, there was stuff like revenue sharing from television. I think they had made modifications to free agency. They had increased the amount of money that would be going to players. It frankly, at that point, I thought it looked like a pretty good deal. After that,
I think on that original thing, the players definitely won.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they got a lot more, and I think, that process is I think always contentious. And I know players had been pretty unhappy in 2015 with the previous deal. Mm-hmm. And this was kind of their chance to make up some ground from the last time around. The players got a lot more benefit. There was the increase in the charter flights, which was another kind of big deal item for the players in terms of comfort and, well-being and such. So when they came back to the table, though, the league initially wanted players to take a 50% pay cut this season, and were drawing back some of the revenue sharing that was coming from the TV deals. And then also put in what I believe the French call a force majeure clause, which is lawyerese for fucking, I don't know. It's a way to basically back out of the deal. I think if something catastrophic happens, like basically the league said, we want to be able to avoid this if there's another.
Yeah, like another pandemic or some shit, yes.
And then they also tried to sneak in, by the way, a catastrophe could be 5 teams dropping in attendance by 25%. Because, of course, MLS has an attendance boner on something like this. But yeah, the final deal, which has now been ratified, the players did take a pay cut, although it was 7.5%, which is, I mean, it's not great, and especially in a league where some of the lower paid players aren't making huge salaries. it can definitely be a hit for them.
Yeah.
Although, there are a lot of sort of normal people out in the world these days who have been furloughed, who have been, not receiving pay, who've been laid off. So, it's unfortunate, but it's certainly not something that any number of us haven't had to deal with. The players also gave away some of the money from the TV deal. I think it was supposed to be that they get a quarter of the television revenues later in this deal, and I think 1 year they had to give back half of that. But it is done now, for better or for worse. I've seen some indications online that a lot of the players have been very alienated by this process because the league basically threatened a lockout, and that was absolutely the worst thing they could have threatened, I think, in this context. In a time where everybody's trying to do their part, for a bunch of fucking billionaires to be like, we're going to shut the door on you if you don't agree to this, was pretty shitty.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think that was the biggest takeaway from this whole thing for me, was the human aspect of it, not even like all the money that's being, negotiated and divided up and split around. It was just like that they thought that it was an okay thing to like tell all these people that they were going to take away their pay and their insurance from their families during the time when the world is literally being ravaged by a virus. I don't know what was going through their heads to think that that was going to be like an acceptable suggestion. Like from a fan standpoint, from a media standpoint, from like the player standpoint, like who did they think was going to be like, we understand, like
right,
I just don't get it. Like,
yeah, that's a great point. The health insurance, honestly, more than anything, like that's, again, in a world where, medical issues are coming up for people and potentially expensive things, like that's a big rug to pull out from people out of essentially a negotiating tactic. It strikes me as very callous and calculated, and frankly, we shouldn't be surprised by MLS doing that sort of thing, because that's literally the entirety of their history,
right,
at this point, period.
It's just,
but yes, it had terrible fucking optics.
Yeah, it's just interesting. Like, I just find it so fascinating how like continually awful they seem to be at all of these kinds of things. I mean, like, I saw a quote, I think it was from Dax McCarty somewhere, where he was talking about how MLS kept moving the deadline to make the decision about what they were going to agree to. And it's like, he said something along the lines of like, we know you're full of shit when you move the deadline, because like you obviously don't have you have no idea what you're doing. You don't know what's going on. You seem disorganized when you have to keep pushing the deadline. Once you move it once, we start to question, your commitment and your motives. And then you move it again, which I think I heard somewhere that they had moved the deadline. They'd shifted it like 4 or 5 times, something like that. So
yeah, it was, I do remember, I don't know where that article was, but yeah, I did see that. Like, most of the player reps, I think, have indicated that this was a pretty bad process. And somebody else also pointed out, and actually it might have been Dax as well, that if you want to continue to grow this league and draw players from abroad, you cannot have a lockout. That's just absolutely one thing. I mean, the playing careers of soccer players is pretty short. And if somebody is going to come from another league to MLS, they can't come and then all of a sudden be like, oh, we just, you're the brand new hottest superstar. You're a, mid-20s good player from another league. But
yeah, your name is Lucas Zelarayan.
Right. And we just decided to cancel a season because we don't like to pay players. Like, that would ruin their growth potential with any kind of international audience.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm not shocked, but it doesn't stop me from being disappointed. But I mean, I've been seeing them I've been seeing reports of unnamed players, obviously, because they don't want to be identified because they've still got to, continue to work within this league. But people saying, using words like irreparable in relation to like how they feel the relationship is now between the league and players. And just like, I've seen people saying that they feel like, the vibe and the situation is worse than it was 2015, which also was a very contentious negotiating time for them. So,
think about in other leagues lockouts, because we do have precedent for this in America, unfortunately. And eventually you would hit a point where fans would get frustrated because it's like millionaires arguing with billionaires, right? And there's a point at which you lose sympathy. And MLS is thousandaires arguing with billionaires.
If that, even. Depending on the players, I forget what the league minimum is at this point. The new league minimum is only just now going to be a little over 100,000, I think. So So right now, I believe it's around 60 to 70 or something like that. I want to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's no more than a lot of us are making at our jobs. So
those are like solid, white collar or sometimes even blue collar salaries.
Yeah.
So, you want to alienate a fan base, go ahead and pinch pennies as billionaires while these guys are just trying to fight for, decent wages or to not go through a 50% pay cut in the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I pulled a quote up here from Chris Wondolowski, who I think he's part of the negotiating team or one of the player reps with the CBA or for the CBA. And he said, "I'm glad I'm out at the end of this year because this is his final year playing. Because 5 years from now with that CBA, the backbone of this league will be guys that still feel wronged from this round of negotiating. And I don't want to be on the other side of the talks in 5 years."
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, I mean, we're at a point where you're seeing good young American players who are already inclined to go abroad.
Mm-hmm.
And if MLS wants to make any effort to retain young talent here, those are the guys that they should be worrying about. Because in 5 years, your 27 and 28-year-olds right now are going to be on the downside of their career. But you need to worry about the 22-year-old who's in this league and is thinking, okay, do I want to stay here and be a big name in MLS, or do I want to take my talents abroad?
Right.
And they look at these negotiations, and they're going to be like, well, fuck that.
Right. Yeah, and you got to keep in mind, like a majority of this league are the guys on the rosters that go from, number 12 through 28 or 30 or whatever it is. It's not a majority of the league that they're negotiating for on behalf of as like the stars or even the starters of the team. They're negotiating primarily for those guys who are making like the minimums and things like that. So it's the bulk of people that are getting, screwed the most by this, and they're going to be the ones that in 5 years aren't going to have forgotten how they were treated last time. So be interesting to see how things go, but we got to have soccer come back at all before we can really move on with that. Speaking of which, leads us right into our next thing, Darby. That's called a transition, my friend.
Oh, my God. That was so smooth.
Thank you.
We haven't been doing this for a month, but it's just like you're right there. You picked up right where you left off.
I appreciate it, Darby. I have been practicing every morning in the mirror. I do a half-hour mini ACES radio just for me and the cat. Just to stay fresh, just stay fresh. So,
is the cat running the soundboard? Is that
the cat is? Yeah, she's remarkably doing a much better job than Brent ever did. So, which speaking of which, obviously he is not here today. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. But Brent got a new job, and it necessitates him working evenings. So he is not going to be available for the foreseeable future, I think. Which I don't know how long that he's supposed to have that job, because I know it's not a permanent thing, right?
I guess as long as they need to re-sanitize masks, right?
Yeah, he's doing temp. He's a temp work. He's a temp worker at Battelle, or contract at Battelle, right?
Yeah. And he's somewhere that's not Ohio. We don't know where. But he's in a different time zone. I'm guessing Chicago myself, but I don't actually know that.
I don't actually particularly care. So Brent won't probably be joining us, I would imagine, for anything else we do this year.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we can try and get... The real problem is getting a string long enough to go from his bucket to your house,
right?
To get into the audio feed, really.
Yeah, I've made some calls and I cannot find one that's even remotely close to being long enough. So yeah, I've already put in more effort than I want to with Brent, so we're considering that done. But we do thank Brent. We obviously are going to miss him, but I'm glad he's working, making some money. And I'm also glad he's not doing a job now that has him out in the grocery stores with all the idiots.
Right.
So hopefully he's a bit safer now.
Yeah, it does seem like most people have decided fuck masks in some stores at this point. So he'll be safer wherever he is, running up and down the aisles of masks, licking them one by one to sanitize them.
Indeed. That's exactly how that works. Anyways, back to my smooth transition.
We did fuck that up.
I did it to myself, really. I did it. I transitioned us, and then I immediately went on a tangent about Bront. So I have no one to blame but myself. But anyways, play is supposed to resume, Darby. I don't know if there's an exact date. If there is, I don't know what it is. I think it's supposed to be in around a month because obviously teams need to, train and warm up and get back into shape. But supposedly there's going to be some sort of preseason type tournament down in Orlando that includes all the teams, if I'm not mistaken. And every team is going to be guaranteed at least 3 games. And then I believe there's going to be beyond that group, that 3-game group stage, there's going to be then a knockout portion. And I think that's all they have planned at this time. They're talking about the league regular season resuming after this tournament, but I think that probably remains to be seen. But what are your thoughts on the format, the return? Do you think the timing is right? It's a lot of information, I think, that just got dumped on us in the last week or so regarding MLS. So just let me know what your thoughts are on all that.
Yeah, well, it's funny because on the one hand, it's a lot of information, and on the other, it's nowhere near enough information.
Right,
there's some indications that maybe on Monday, which should be coincidentally the day that this episode drops, that there'll be more information. Like you said, what we know at this point is like they play 3 games in some sort of like group stage and then a tournament, but it's all speculation at this point what that would specifically look like. As far as the overall format, this has just been... I realize that this is such a weird time and a weird thing, and they have to figure out how to ramp play back up. So this serves kind of as a second preseason, but then it also weirdly counts as regular season. But then the tournament doesn't count as regular season because not everybody will be in the elimination part of things.
I didn't really understand that. So like this Orlando thing has nothing to do with the regular season stuff, right? It's a completely separate...
Yeah, although the group stage games will count as regular season games.
Okay, so part of the Orlando thing counts towards the regular season.
Yes.
But so only the 3 games that everybody's quote-unquote guaranteed to play count.
Right. Yeah, and so I don't know. So the teams that are going into the elimination tournament after that, what happens to the people who don't advance in the group stage? Do they stay quarantined in Orlando? Because all of the players are going to Orlando because that's where the fucking Disney World of Sport thing is that they can play shit at once. But there's just a lot of weird stuff. Like now everybody is quarantined together. We know an FC Dallas player has tested positive for COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
We know that putting people in a contained area and playing contact sports means that there is a potential, they're going to have training or testing protocols and stuff in place, presumably. But if the disease gets into the player pool, what's going to happen? What happens if a player gets injured and can no longer play? Are they stuck in Orlando? They've indicated there might be exemptions for players who have like pregnant wives. This format has really created more questions than answers that the league is going to have to deal with.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting that this is how they've chosen to roll back into things, because I don't know, maybe I'm alone in this, but I frankly don't give a shit about this fucking tournament that they're planning. I have like zero investment in it, and I don't know why they think anyone else would. And so I don't think it's worth the risk of like rushing things back to like hold this tournament that is like essentially meaningless, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's like they've said, there's going to be a trophy and there's going to be $1 million in prize money. Well,
$1 million, Darby.
I know, right? Like a good number. And what does $1 million in prize money mean? Is that going to the players? Is it going to the owners? There's no indication. And yeah, I don't like, this is because of the timing. They're indicating that they'll probably have to be like a couple of games played in a day, so it might be World Cup-esque. Is anybody going to tune in on Tuesday at 10 a.m. for MLS round robin games?
Well, and are the players even going to tune in? Like, you know, like this means nothing little to nothing to us. It surely means little to nothing to them. I mean, they know there's no illusions here about what this is. It's a glorified preseason with an attempt to make some money and some like draw some eyes. Like that's all it is.
Right.
Like,
or
I
like
can't imagine that they're itching to win this thing. You know,
right.
Like
or it's kind of a weaker version of the Open Cup. They've actually claimed that the winner of this tournament might get a CCL bid, but also it's not entirely up to MLS because those are already designated and like CONCACAF I think is involved in the process, or at least US Soccer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, normally your CCL spots are winning MLS Cup, the regular season champions in each conference, and then Open Cup. And then I think the Canadian teams get a spot for
the Canadian Championship
for their
four teams,
4-team thing.
Yeah, their little
So those spots are like all that North America has. So if you award a CCL spot because of this tournament, it has to come from somewhere else.
Right, you have to take it away from something, which I assume maybe that's what this is going to be. Maybe that's they feel like they can give away the Open Cup spot, but I don't know how much control they even have over that because that tournament isn't just MLS. It doesn't belong to MLS,
right.
You know?
Well,
so what's to say that this wasn't the year that a USL team was going to somehow squeak through and win it, you know?
Right. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, so Open Cup doesn't have Canadian teams in it, right?
No, because that's what they play, the Canadian Championship. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So what happens if a Canadian team wins this bullshit preseason tournament?
I mean, great question. I don't know.
Are you taking away an MLS spot then?
Right. Well, and then what happens to the Canadian spot?
Right.
You know, do they play that tournament at some point in the next couple months and they just say, well, Toronto's already got one, so if they win it goes to the runner-up? Like, you know,
imagine being the second place team in a 4-team tournament and you get a CCL spot.
I wouldn't even want it. Like, that's the thing that I think fascinates me most about all this is just like from an integrity standpoint, like I would, as a competitor, wouldn't care or want any of these like accolades should I win them. Like, there are so many. They're always going to be this thing on my resume and in the history of sports and soccer that's always going to have an asterisk next to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's always going to have these qualifiers. Like, well, they won MLS Cup that year, but it was also the year that every team only played 7 games, and there was a 4-month break in between the season, and and they all played them in empty stadiums in Orlando, and I don't know. I personally am having a lot of trouble caring, even about the potential games after the Orlando thing. I don't know.
Yeah, the tournament, like I said, it's creating more problems than it's fixing, and I'm not even sure it serves a bigger benefit than playing in empty stadiums. So this, I guess, reduces travel for a month. But at that point, you just signed a CBA that has more charter flights. Couldn't you
and
just
they're not,
use charter flights?
They're not just available now, from what I understand. They're required.
That there has to be like X number.
Yeah, the new charter flights aren't you get access to more. It's now you have to use this minimum amount over the course of the season. So, which is a great change, but how does that affect things? I don't know.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see. It's very weird. I think it's just as always with things that MLS does, just like with the CBA thing. I'm just do you have any real idea or strategy of what's going on here? I don't. You just continually seem to somehow mismanage literally every major event that comes your way.
If you trip on your dick for 10 consecutive years, don't you eventually move your dick out of the way?
Yeah, Darby. Every time you step on it and you trip on it, you stretch it out a little more. So it's constantly becoming longer and more unruly. It's a problem. Okay, it's a problem. Oh goodness. Well, did you have any last thoughts on that before we move on, real quick, to what I think is our final full topic? Oh no, we've got 2 more here. 2 more things to talk about.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's weird, but it's also the most MLS solution that they could have come up with.
Yeah. Well, let me just ask you this. How have you felt during this time about soccer or sports in general? I mean, have you been missing them? Have you been wishing that they were on TV, that you could watch them? Or, I'm not saying go to the games, because obviously that's not been an option, but have you been desiring for them to at least be on TV, even with the empty stadiums? Have you gotten into watching the Bundesliga now that it's one of the leagues that's back?
No, ironically, I haven't. And this has been a weird thing for me personally, because I know there's all those replays that are going on, right? And we talked about this in a previous episode. I was actually interested in rewatching the FC Cincinnati game with Mensa doing color commentary.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't gone back and sought that out. I haven't watched any of the replays. I haven't watched any Bundesliga games. It's like that part of my brain just kind of shut off for now. Don't get me wrong. I miss the games. I would love to go to a game. I would love to spend time with my friends before and after a game. But I don't know. Maybe I'm realizing that as much of my enjoyment is from the pre and post stuff than from the games itself.
Yeah.
But I haven't watched anything. Have you?
No, I think you and I are literally side by side on this. I mean, I have not watched any of the Bundesliga games. I didn't really watch it before, but it hasn't attracted me in as a new fan, with it being one of the only things. I haven't really missed watching crew games. I said this to some people yesterday that I was hanging out with, my buddy Anthony Delicio and Ty Phillips, who everybody knows from Pursuit. He's been on the show a couple times. Was supposed to be one of our potential new hosts. I think I'm, like you said, I think I've realized that most of my enjoyment comes from the non-game related portions of the community, and it's the tailgate before, it's the lad parties after, it's the getting together at the brewery. Granted, 4 away games, but I enjoy more so being there to talk with people and hang out and share a drink, and that's the stuff I miss. But I really haven't missed watching any sports, and I think that's part of why I am having a real struggle with caring about the stuff. I genuinely don't think I'm gonna watch the Orlando stuff, because we're not gonna be able to get together to watch it. And so I don't think I'll turn it on because, like you, I haven't watched any of the replay stuff. None of the games that they've rebroadcast have I turned on. So, yeah, I don't know. Not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and of course it depends on, the convenience factor. Might I, if a game is on, and my home office setup, I'm still working from home. I've got enough monitors that if a game's on, sure, I could throw it on one of the monitors and not affect things.
Yeah.
At most, I'm going to watch crew games. I'm certainly not. It's not going to be like World Cup where you're watching all the games that are available because, like, there's still great stuff going on and you really care about the tournament and how matchups are going to proceed. This is just going to be like you maybe tune in for your team and nothing else. And I know, I signed up for that U.S. soccer, like, fan advisory board crap. Did you ever get any emails about that?
That sounds familiar, but I don't have anything from them, and I don't know if I signed up for it or what. I don't. Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's just basically a thing that MLS shoots out, and it's once a month or so you get a survey, and half the time it's like it's free market research for them.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, oh, how much do you watch MLS and stuff like that. And so this time they did do a survey that was sort of talking about the tournament and what sort of features would make you more likely to watch. And I think they were like, do you want like Zoom fans? Do you want virtual TIFO? Do you want like,
what does that even mean?
Coaches? I don't know. I mean, of course, they never explain this shit in the surveys, but they kept looking for.
Please give me your opinion on this thing that I haven't explained to you.
Right. Well, and just all of it felt so gimmicky. I don't want, to hear the halftime talk from the coach or like virtual tours before the game or whatever. Like we're in it for the soccer. And sure, maybe there are some people who really want that all access nonsense, but just acknowledge that this tournament is an imperfect solution. It's what you've decided on, whether or not it's a good thing. There aren't cutesy technical things that they can do. Like, my experience is not going to be enhanced by you pumping in fake crowd noise. If I want that, I'll watch a Seattle game.
Oh my God, Darby, Jesus!
I know, savage. Yeah, no, it's just it's gonna be a weird thing, and I'll probably watch some, but I definitely agree. I'm not going to get hyped about the tournament overall.
Yeah. Well, I'll be interested to see how they present it as far as where you can access it and how you can watch it. If it's going to be just streams available through their website or what. Because I know that even with the replay games that they've been showing, they've still been like location locked and stuff. Because like I've seen Steve Abreu tweeting that he couldn't watch the crew replay games and things like that. So I don't know what I know that they might not have any control over that. They might be locked into certain contracts and deals that require them to do that. But I think it just seems so shitty, given everything, that they can't somehow make it so that anyone who wants to watch a replay of a game from 2, 5, 10 fucking years ago can't watch it. Like, I don't know. It just seems crazy. So I'm interested to see how they're going to be broadcasting this tournament.
Yeah, well, it's being hosted at a Disney facility, which means it's being hosted at an ESPN facility.
Right.
So
yeah, which I'll be interested. So maybe it'll be on ESPN Plus. I don't know. But then I was confused because this is a little tangential, but that Chicago Bulls Michael Jordan documentary that was like all everybody could talk about for a while was like I don't know what the deal is. It's like a combined production between Netflix and ESPN, but it's not on either streaming service. So
because of course,
I personally have had no way to watch it yet, even though I would really like to. So I don't know what the deal is with that kind of thing. I don't know if this is going to be something similar to that, where ESPN is producing it, but it's not going to be available on ESPN Plus, or I don't know. We'll see, because that's going to determine how and if I watch it as well.
Yeah, you're going to have to make this tournament super easy to get to. Like, whether it's broadcast television or, streaming, both, like, not geo-blocking crap. They're going to have to do a lot of work to make this accessible to people if they want to even vaguely have a shot at pulling something off.
Yeah. And I would really hope that they do, because it seems like they're going to be, outside of the NWSL, I think they're going to be the first male professional sports to resume, aren't they? Or is the NBA going to be back before them? Do you know? I can't recall.
I don't. I think MLS is going to be the first back at that point. Although, I'm not sure how much of an effect that's going to have. Are there sports junkies who are going to be so desperate to watch MLS because literally nothing else is on? I don't know if I buy that argument. I'm sure there'll be a non-zero number of people.
Whether it's a consequential amount is probably pretty questionable.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd be curious to. That's probably data that no one's attempting to compile, or probably would be very difficult to collect. But I would be curious how many people have been watching Bundesliga for the first time ever in the last couple weeks since they returned.
Yeah, I think their ratings were pretty impressive, if I recall, at least from that opening weekend. I think their numbers were 2 and 3 times higher than they usually would be, even for some of the less impressive games.
Well, maybe that lends some credence to the thought that the first leagues back will get some extra attention and have the chance to pull in new fans. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do with that. One of our last real topics here is obviously going to be about everything that's been going on the last week and a half or so. That was kicked off with the murder of George Floyd by that squad of police officers in Minneapolis, and the overwhelming amount of protests and just activism that has come out in support of the Black Lives Matter movement over the last 8 to 10 days. The league, and specifically individual players, for the most part, really seem to have been taking up the flag and the role of speaking out and voicing their support for this movement. I have not been keeping track of what the league has been doing regarding it. I'm sure that you probably have, Darby, because I know I've seen you tweeting about it and stuff. I've just been too focused on other non-soccer things. But I do know that one of the crew's own players, Derek Etienne, has been tweeting quite a bit and sharing some really harrowing and upsetting experiences that he's had even during the last week. So I don't know, do you want to kind of break it down a little bit more about what he's been talking about, and then we can dive into what the league as a whole has been doing?
Sure. Yeah. So again, for anyone who hasn't been watching, Derek Etienne Jr., I don't know if it was initially an Instagram thing or what, but basically shared an experience that he had several days ago, kind of what I would say near the peak of protesting. So it was just after they started shutting down downtown Columbus, I believe, maybe that first day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was right around the very beginning of things. So
yeah, so basically, he lives downtown and was trying to get home and got stopped 2 separate times in that process, just trying to get to his home. And in one of the instances, the police officer said, and this is not a direct quote, but it's pretty close to a direct quote, "You look like the type of person who has warrants out." Which is an incredibly disgusting thing, and unfortunately not all that uncommon a thing that people in the Black community here in Columbus and elsewhere have to deal with. In fact, I saw some later follow-up that indicated the cop was questioning, well, you have New Jersey plates, so how can you say you live in Columbus, and what's the name of your apartment complex, and what's your apartment number? And the officer was even indicating, like, I don't believe the answers that you are giving to me in response to these questions. And then, in fact, a little while later, Jordan Hamilton indicated on Twitter that he had been in the car with Derek for another similar experience 2 days prior. So there were multiple instances in a couple of days, basically, where this was coming up. And Derek took this as an opportunity to speak out more generally, you know, about everything that was going on. And I think personally he did a great job of vocalizing, and I'm very happy. It appears as though you know, the team has been supportive of him speaking out. The league has been supportive. They had him do an interview with Taylor Twellman, regardless of what you think of Taylor and his gigantic fucking head. He is somebody who people listen to. So having that conversation, I think, did a good job of getting things out there. And I think the league has done even a series of articles and or videos where they've had various people speaking up about their experiences and what things have been like. I think most recently Kai Kamara was somebody who spoke out about this. So there, in terms of individual players, there's definitely been good opportunity. I know Zach Steffen also has been very vocal online, and like there's a sort of an athletes for BLM hashtag and organization, I think that's kind of sprung up in the past week or so. So yeah, there's been a lot of stuff going on at the individual level for sure.
Yeah, if you go to the homepage for MLS right now, they have I mean, everything basically is all about BLM, which is great. That they're elevating voices. They've got multiple interviews here from black athletes, black coaches, black former athletes. They've got two of the top three here right now are from one's from Mark Anthony Kay, who plays for LAFC. One's from someone who plays for NYCFC. One's from Patrice Bernier, who I believe is retired now and is part of the staff at Montreal. We've got a piece here from Zach Awani, who's obviously a former player, former star before his horrible leg injury. Got quotes here from Peter Vermes, longtime personality in the league and coach of Sporting Kansas City. So it's I'm pretty pleased with the amount of exposure that they're giving it, the amount of press that they're committing to it, to spreading the message and seemingly supporting the movement. I'd like to see them do a bit more than just talk about it. I know I've seen them tweet out links to various places you can make donations and things like that. And I know obviously they can't make players or staff or anything go and participate in protests or things like that, but I would hope that if anybody who was an employee of the team or the league wanted to do that they would certainly allow them to. But I haven't heard of any players actually being out and protesting. Have you, Darby? Do you know if any crew, would be it crew or anywhere else in the league, actually attending the protests?
Well, so I will say I heard secondhand that Bez was involved in the protests that originated in Bexley over the weekend.
Oh, the march, yes, the one that marched yesterday from Bexley to the State House.
Yeah, so that's one instance. I don't know that I've seen things specifically about players joining in, but they may not be, advertising that necessarily.
Yeah.
Since, it is a highly personal thing. And I will acknowledge, the point of the protests isn't necessarily to be visible as an individual.
Sure.
So if you're one of those fucking Instagram influencers who's taking photos in front of murals and shit and then leaving, you can get fucked, first of all. But no, I appreciate that, Bez going, but not advertising or flaunting it, I think is the right approach. It makes me feel good to know that somebody involved with the team is doing something, but they're also not treating it like a PR opportunity.
Yeah, I think there's a fine balance there, right? Because I definitely agree with you. I don't want it to be used as a PR opportunity. I don't want it to feel like that way, whether it is actually being used like that or not. But I think there's also obviously, like, we know that celebrity has power associated with it, and so I think that there is something significant to seeing people like that participating in actions like that. So I was just curious if you'd heard of anybody or seen anybody out there, because I hadn't really. So
yeah, no, I mean, frankly, I've been so busy being mad, I haven't specifically looked for crew players. I would say if anybody out there who listens has seen examples, we'd love to hear about it. So if you want to shoot us a DM on Twitter or something, let us know, and we can talk about it the next time or put it on our Twitter account or something. Because you do make a good point. Like the upside of celebrity is increased. I guess not even awareness, because I would hope that basically everybody is aware of what's going on right now.
Yeah, you got to be under a rock if you're not aware.
Yeah, but maybe inspiring. So if you see a player taking part in the march or rally, maybe next time you're more inclined to go yourself. So if anybody has seen stuff like that, let us know and we'll spread the word, because that's a really good point.
Yeah. How about the crew and their response to things? It's just on the team level. Are you happy with that statement that they put out? That wasn't even really the crew statement. It was like a half and half crew Browns thing. And how do you feel about what they've said and if what they've done, which doesn't seem like they've actually done a whole lot, but besides acknowledge it. But
yeah, it's okay. I will say I appreciate the fact that they did make a statement. I'll start off with that because I don't want to bash them entirely. I think it's disappointing. I believe it took about 4 days for them to release something, and it was to the point that I was starting to harass them on Twitter.
It just came out they just submitted that statement on the 1st, so that was last Monday.
Yeah, and
protests have been going on since like the 28th, I think. Yeah, so it was 4 or 5 days since. Yeah,
they were certainly not among the leaders in the league in terms of the speed with which they released a statement. They weren't dead last, but they were nowhere near first. The statement was, frankly, it was kind of vague. Somebody, and I can't remember who, Keith Noss shared this. Somebody sort of rated all the various teams in the league, like in terms of the strength of their statement, and they had like 8 different criteria of things they could mention, and the Crews scored 1 out of 8 on that. I think in looking at their rubric, I would have maybe given them 2, but 2 out of 8 is still not great.
No,
it was very vague. Given that Columbus, first of all, was one of the earlier cities to see protests and violence. It was like the Columbus Freedom Fund was one of the earliest ones to pop up to cover people's bail money right after Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And because Columbus, unfortunately, does have a history with police violence, this is something that I wish they'd been more proactive and in talking about. Now, maybe because they were doing a joint statement with the Browns, maybe they had to coordinate more. I can give them a slight benefit of the doubt in that context, but I could also make an argument that those are 2 distinct entities in 2 distinct cities, and maybe you should have gone ahead and done separate statements.
Yeah.
But, so the Columbus statement did mention deaths. It did mention the suffering of Black communities in the United States. They didn't mention the police or police violence. They didn't reference the impact of these things on players or staff or fans. I mean, obviously Columbus has a long history of having black players, whether they're American, whether they're from Africa, from from Europe, from Central and South America. We've had a lot of black players. We have black front office members.
Mm-hmm.
Dante Washington is a very visible example as a former player who's now our front office staff. Like,
yeah, I mean, they litter our history. I mean,
yeah,
some of our biggest names, Stern John, Jeff Cunningham, Brian West, Dante Washington, and even, more recently, Kai Kamara, regardless how you feel about him, Ola Kamara, Zach Steffen, Jonathan Mensah, Harrison Awful. I mean, some of the all-time best crew players are black men.
Yeah, so I would have loved for there to be more specificity there, but I do think something you mentioned earlier is actually more important. I'll give them a pass on a weak statement if there are specific actions that follow after this. One thing I liked about people have kind of dumped on the Chicago Fire response, and regardless, I mean that team in front office is a dumpster fire any way you look at it.
Yeah.
But one of the things they did was they established a deadline for them to start taking concrete steps. And I do appreciate that, because establishing a deadline is a way to help make more concrete things happen.
Yeah.
Statements are only statements. What I'm more interested in is what the team is willing to do for their part after releasing the statement. So I am anxious to see what they have coming, because if it's a statement and then nothing else happens, that's going to be greatly disappointing.
Yeah, and I am concerned that is what we're headed towards. I think you were pretty nice about this. I'm not as positive. I have not as positive feelings as you. I think that the statement was pretty weak. I think that it could very easily have been substituted in for any other kind of tragedy.
Sure, yeah.
I don't think that the wording was very well thought out. I think it should have been a separate thing on its own. I think the Browns should have put out their own separate thing. I think it's very weird that the last sentence reads, "We take great pride in our city," when it's
two cities,
a statement for two sports teams in two completely different cities. Yeah. I think that that all that said is unacceptable given the amount of time it took them to put it together. If this was something that they came out with the very first day or hours after or something like that, then okay, I would be much more willing to understand that it wasn't necessarily the most perfect thing. But when you take 4 to 5 days to craft something and this is what it is, I think that this is unacceptable. And like a quick scroll through of Twitter, of their Twitter, with the exception of like retweeting Etienne's tweets and, like the official Major League Soccer, we hear you, we see you, we support you, here's links to NAACP stuff and things like that. There's not been another Columbus Crew tweet about this.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I do want to see more moving forward. And what I would recommend for fans out there, continue to push the front office for specifics on this. I think a lot of people are pretty unhappy with that statement. And frankly, like I said, I would like to see a lot more out of this. So I intend to continue to push for this. And we're in a time period where we can be pulled a million different ways in terms of things you can do to be a part of this movement or to try and help make things better. And frankly, this is one of them. We all put a significant amount of money into this team. We have every right to reach out to the front office and demand more and demand specifics and demand timelines. So that's something I 100% recommend. When I was sort of writing my notes for this was my last bullet point, is that, with movements, things can fade. This is not the first time that the Black Lives Matter hashtag has come up. It's been around for years now, and you can convincingly make an argument that not much has happened since it started being used, because the attention of our nation is invariably pulled away to other things. In fact, we see it with the coronavirus, which is almost ironically kind of forgotten right now, even though we are still very much dealing with it as an issue, because our focus has shifted to this other thing that demands our attention. But I have concerns that over coming weeks and months, there will be a fatigue and people will lose interest. They'll find something else to become interested and invested in. So continue pushing for this in whatever context over the coming weeks. Whether it's reaching out to elected officials, whether it's demanding change within your local police department, perhaps signing a petition demanding their resignation if anybody has developed one, potentially, and push the front office. Email your, if you go to the crew website, most of the front office people have their email address listed there. How often they check it as a public-facing account, I don't know. But you can also call the general number and leave a message. Like, continuing to make this an issue is a good way to ensure that more meaningful action takes place.
Yeah, I agree. I would love to see an announcement about, specific concrete steps that they're going to take to get involved in the community in ways that they will help to support and elevate. Even if it's just they can stay in their wheelhouse if they want. Just say, we're committed to additional funding and support and integration of young Black athletes into our academy and our training programs, and here is how we're going to do it. Here's where we're going to put some money. We're going to double down on our partnership with the Lyndon McKinley soccer team, or we're going to also take under our wing. Here's a couple other predominantly Black schools in the area that we're going to bring into that same program, where we're going to have, Frankie Hayduck freaking coaching the goddamn team like he does with Lyndon. Things like that. I want concrete steps. I don't want late, poorly thought out platitudes and, a Blackout Tuesday tweet. Like, that's not good enough.
Yeah. And I think when we as fans reach out to the front office, we have an obligation to make specific suggestions. As dissatisfied as we were with that statement, it's not enough to just say that's not enough. Give good, concrete suggestions. So if it's, increasing, the support for the KIP Columbus program, which serves a lot of Black students. If it's, some people have suggested discontinuing any relationship with Columbus police. Those are all good and valid things. But if you want change, voice what the specific change is that you're looking for.
Definitely give suggestions on what you want.
Yeah, if
don't
you
just say I want more from you and then leave it there.
Yeah.
I agree. Yep. Well, I don't want to dwell on this too much longer. I think we did a good job covering it. I will say, based on your hint earlier there, Darby, I did start a petition demanding the resignation of the mayor, Andrew Ginther, and our police chief, Thomas Quinlan. If you are interested in signing it, you can go to columbus-justice.com. Currently has over 21,000 signatures, and next steps are being taken to launch an official recall election on Andrew Ginther, because I have no intention that either of these arrogant men will acknowledge this petition in any way.
Sure. And that is a good point of distinction. To remove this petition is not to remove the mayor from office, because that's not a thing that a petition can do.
Right.
So you're looking into a petition also that would initiate the recall process.
Yeah. So if you want to sign the resignation petition right now, that's great. Like I said, just go to the URL that I said a moment ago. It's a URL that I purchased that will redirect you to the change.org petition automatically. It's just a little bit easier to remember than the change.org URL we have. But yeah, there are next steps already in the work. works. The paperwork's being filed. People are talking behind the scenes and organizing behind the scenes. How that works is what you need to do is you need to you have a 30-day period of time from when you file the paperwork to gather the required signatures. And what that is it's a number, it's a percentage based on the amount of people who came out and participated in the previous election, which was last November, and which Andrew Ginther disgracefully ran unopposed, which should be an embarrassment for anyone that lives in this city. There should always be someone running in opposition. No one should ever just run for free. And turnout was very low. So the number that we need to reach is very low. So it's 100% likely that we could get the necessary signatures on this thing. I believe the number is only in the range of 20,000, which we've already exceeded with this resignation petition. Granted, there's always going to be a fairly high rate of people who have signed who don't actually live in Columbus or for whatever reason don't qualify as a valid signature. So you always need to gather more than what you need, but the odds are fairly in our favor with this. So if that's something that you're interested in, sign the current one through change. I'll be getting in touch once the official recall one is out there. I don't know if we're going to be able to gather signatures digitally. I know there was some confusing legislation that said that was okay, and then I think it may have gotten rescinded recently or something like that. So it may be something we have to do in person, but thankfully there's thousands and thousands of people meeting every day downtown at the State House. So that's where we'll be beginning to collect those. So I would recommend you sign the change thing because that will give me your email, will give us your email, so we'll have a way to get in touch with you for when it's time to collect the signatures for the other thing. And let's get this guy out of office. Let's hold him accountable. Andy Ginther has not been a good mayor before now, and he's been a disgraceful one for the past week and a half, and he needs to be held accountable for his actions, as does Chief Quinlan. So that's my little speech for today, my little sermon.
And
Sorry,
if you came here expecting nothing but soccer talk, you've clearly never listened to this podcast before. So
right, exactly. Yeah, so
just keep that in mind. Hopefully you guys have also been out protesting stuff. Have you made it out to anything at all, Darby, yet? Did you go to the UA one? That's kind of close-ish to home for you.
I have not. So I fully acknowledge that the whole coronavirus thing has me a little sketchy about mass gatherings. It's definitely something that I'm interested in doing. I've been, using my voice, using my dollars, trying to educate myself. I watched 13th last night on Netflix.
What's that?
It's a documentary done by Ava DuVernay.
Oh, I love her.
I hope I'm pronouncing her. Is that how you pronounce her name?
Yep.
Okay. Basically, sort of 13th referring to the 13th Amendment, but it's a really good sort of high level overview of just sort of the shit that African Americans have had to experience since abolishing slavery, and it sort of goes into how, because there's functionally a loophole in the 13th Amendment which says slavery is an involuntary servitude is abolished except as punishment for a crime.
Yeah.
How that led into the development of mass incarceration and just essentially trading one form of slavery for another. It's very good. It's under 2 hours. It brings in a lot of voices from different areas, but I would highly recommend it if somebody's looking for a place to start, which I certainly I benefited from it. I picked up a lot of things that I didn't know beforehand. So
awesome. That's great. I haven't heard of that, and I'm adding it to my Netflix watch list right now. Another thing by her actually that I would recommend everybody watch if they haven't already is When They See Us, which came out last year. It is all about the Central Park 5 which happened back in '89, which was only 2 years after I was born, so I didn't really live it, but I've watched it, and it is just it is a remarkable little miniseries.
Sure, yeah, that one's on my list too. So that one's kind of I hate to say dramatization because I think that implies something that's not. It's not a fictionalization. It's bringing in actors to play the roles. So it's not a documentary, right? But would you consider it like to be pretty legit as a source then?
I mean, I think so. Granted, my knowledge of the events, like I just said, is fairly limited, as I didn't live it, and I wasn't around to experience the news reports and stuff on it. But
sure.
I know a bit about Ava DuVernay, and this is obviously a topic that she's very passionate about is telling Black stories, and so I feel comfortable saying that I think it's probably fairly true to what actually happened and how these kids were and their families were treated. I mean, it literally, part of the story involves the current shitbag of a president, and his racism then 20 years, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, definitely go into it with that in mind, what you're saying, Darby, that this isn't a straightforward documentary for sure. But I think it's definitely something that you can trust as a source of information about that incident and just like a good insight into what Black people experience on a day-to-day basis. Like I said, created, written by her. She's a Black woman, a majority Black cast. And I think a fairly large portion of the staff that worked on it were people of color, Black people. So I think it's worth sitting down and watching, regardless of whether this was all going on right now or not. I think it's an important story, and it tells you a lot about the history of racism in America, and especially the relationship that police play in that, and just how, it's about 5 young men who were completely falsely accused of raping and assaulting a woman simply because of the fact that they were Black and that they happened to occasionally hang out in Central Park where this went down. And the cops had no other suspects, so they said it's got to be these kids. Like, it's just, it goes right back to what we were talking about with Derek Etienne's tweets earlier. Like, you look like someone who has a warrant.
Right.
They grade up these kids because they had these preconceived notions about how they expected young Black men to behave, and it seemed like, well, if they didn't, it's the attitude of like, well, maybe they did or didn't rape and assault this woman, but if even if they didn't, they probably did it some other time when they didn't get caught, or they're gonna do it eventually, so we may as well get them now. That kind of fucking shitty attitude. So I really would recommend it.
Okay.
But obviously it would be good to probably balance it with the film you're talking about, which is more.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's lots. Whether you're a documentary person, a film person, a book person, a podcast person, the most important thing, I think, is just to get out there and try and absorb more and understand better. Like, apart from anybody's feelings on the phrase or the term woke, like, becoming aware is a process. It's not a destination. There is never going to be a moment where all of us are fully aware and enlightened. It's literally a journey. So it's unfortunate. Sometimes it takes these sorts of things to remind us to continue that journey and to become more aware. But definitely take the opportunity, because being more informed and educated and seeing these perspectives is always a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got no excuse right now because you've got plenty of time because there's a freaking pandemic still going on. So you're still at home a bunch. So, even if you're working and you throw this on the side screen or something, or, watch an episode of the miniseries, one a night or one every other night or something, I think it'll benefit you as a person to view them and learn and grow from them. So definitely. Yeah. And everyone, I wanted to just briefly jump back to the fact that you had said that you haven't been out to protest. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody can't do everything. But like you said, you're using your voice to speak out and to elevate things that you see on social media, and you're doing other things. There's way more to to helping promote this movement than just showing up downtown to protest. So don't get too hard on yourself if you can't be at a physical protest. There's so much more that you can be doing too.
Yeah, I mean, there's and you know, it sounds callous, but money always helps. You know, you see things where, you know, people were bringing in literally so many pallets of water for protesters that they didn't need it anymore, aside from the thing where somebody may have fucking poisoned it with
God, let's not get into that
or whatever. But money is a valuable resource to movements. You know, money makes the world go round, and they can allocate. It's also why it's often better to give money to food pantries rather than cans of food, because they know what they need better than you do. So yes, what you said is a good point. There are lots of opportunities out there to support and find the niche that makes you comfortable. Maybe stretch your comfort zone a little bit if you can. If you're able and have the resources, you know, go outside your comfort zone a little, but not everybody needs to be on the front line, waving a sign. There are lots of ways you can do things.
Yeah, I think that's important. That you, at some point during this, you need to get uncomfortable. That is just the nature of what this is. Everybody's going to have a moment where they're facing something that makes them uncomfortable, but that is how we're going to get through this and how we're going to evolve and grow from this. And there is no shame in having that moment. So don't be afraid of it. Don't shy away from it. But again, do what you can and what you're comfortable with to help out, whatever that may be. And also, like, take care of yourself. You need to take days off. You need to take time off. Don't get on social media for a day or something. You know, don't go protest for a day. Take a day off. So take care of yourself too, because you can't fight forever and you can't fight nonstop. And just know that there are other people who are taking up the mantle when you're taking a break, and you can take the mantle back from them when they need a break. So we're all in this together.
Yeah.
Okay, Darby, let's jump on here to our two last things here. Something, they're both hopefully maybe a little bit more lighthearted and fun than what we've been talking about for the last 20 so minutes, but we'll do our usual crew superlatives thing here. Do you want to lay out what you're thinking, what's behind this one, since you came up with it?
Sure. Right at the last minute, I was like, oh shit, we need to talk. I haven't given this any thought whatsoever. So with the CBA, you know, now being finalized and whatever, at one point I was on the Players Association website. Actually, I think it might have been because somebody pointed out that the MLS Players Association representatives are super duper predominantly white, which is not actually relevant to this lighter thing that we're talking about. And I noticed that the crew rep is our personal favorite, John Kempen, the goalkeeper who can unhinge his jaw and swallow an entire opposing player whole. And while that is a useful skill to have in certain contexts, I don't know if it's great in negotiations. And so I was wondering who you would pick on the current roster to be the team rep on behalf of the Players Association.
Interesting. I think this is a fun, cool question. So I'm on the page right now, and I'm clicking through all the reps, and I don't want to be – I'm not saying this definitively because I don't know for sure, but based on my knowledge, I don't know if there's a single representative that isn't American. There, like you said, it's mostly white, mostly white men. There are a few men of color, and maybe some of these guys are Canadian because I'm not aware. And maybe there are a few that aren't American or North American either. But I mean, you've got. Let me just read off the list of representatives real fast. I think that we've got time for this.
Sure.
Atlanta's is Jeff Lorenowitz. Chicago's is CJ Sapong. Columbus's is obviously Kempen. DC's is Russell Canoose. Cincinnati's is Nick Hageland. Montreal's is Evan Bush. New England is Brad Knighton. NYCFC's Brad Stuver. Lots of goalies. Red Bull is Sean Davis. Orlando's Brian Rowe. Philly is Ray Gaddis. Toronto is Eric Zavaleta. Colorado's is Clint Irwin. Minnesota's is Brent Kalman. Dallas's is Jimmy Maurer. Houston's is Zarek Valentin. There's no E at the end, so I don't think it's Valentine. Valentin. LA's is Perry Kitchen. LAFC's is Walker Zimmerman. Steve Clark is Portland's. Zach McMath is Salt Lake's. JT Marcinikowski is the San Jose Earthquakes rep. Seattle's is Harry Shipp. Kansas's is Tim Melia. And then Vancouver does not have someone it listed here. So, wow, I think more than half of those were goalies.
Yeah, and
which is
at
interesting.
least 3 of them are current or former Crew players.
Yeah, which is cool. I'm happy and proud about that. But I don't know. There are a few names there that I don't recognize. So I don't want, like I said, I don't want to be presumptive, but I don't know if there are any non-Americans, maybe a few Canadians hidden in here. Representing, which I think
I don't know
is
if that's like a deliberate choice or maybe even like a policy decision that they like aren't including international players since it's a domestic league. I have no idea. That would be complete speculation on my part, and I don't want to do that. But
yeah, I just think that's interesting to notice. I'm going to operate on the assumption that that's not a mandatory thing, and I'm going to say right off the bat, which I was already planning on picking him before I came across this, but I was going to say I'd really love to see Jonathan Menson there. I've been really impressed with him and his time with us, both as a player and just like as a human being. I think he does a lot of really awesome work for with all the work he does back in Ghana with supporting those people. And I've really enjoyed hearing him when he has been called upon to speak about things. I think he's a fairly well-spoken and well-intentioned guy who isn't like quick to spout something off. I feel like there's a lot of thought that he gives to things when he says things. So I feel like he's already a great leader for the team on the field. We know he's like part of that leadership committee or whatever, if that's still a thing. He was for Berhalter. So I think he would make a good representative here.
yeah, that's a good call. Yeah, he has that sort of quiet, calm confidence.
Yeah.
That would be. See, you took it all seriously. I was like
Picking someone funny.
Right. I'm like, okay, Vito Wormgoord just like standing there with all his fucking tats and like the top knot and stuff would be intimidating as hell. But I don't think that's it. And then I thought, Artur has like such a great resting pissed off face.
Yeah.
Where like I feel like anytime he looks at an imposing player, they have to have a thought in the back of their mind like, this guy might murder me. Like just he has a glare about him that I think would be hardcore in negotiations. But what I came down to is Sebastian Berhalter, because at this point the Berhalter family basically runs U.S. soccer.
Yeah.
Between Greg and Jay. So I feel like Sebastian could just come in and say, if you don't listen to our demands, we're going to shut this whole fucking thing down.
Yeah. Well, but Jay's gone now.
Oh, is he?
Maybe he hasn't left yet, but I do remember a few months ago it was announced that he was going to be stepping down.
Oh, yeah. This was announced back in February. I'm not much of a soccer man. I don't know if you know this. Because that was after a bunch of people got on Glassdoor and talked about how shitty the culture is in U.S. soccer.
Yeah, a bunch of like current and former employees left crappy reviews. Yeah.
Okay.
Who could have potentially predicted that would happen?
So have they named a replacement yet then? Or has he?
I don't know, and I don't know if he's actually stepped down yet or not, because that was so many of these kinds of things happened in February, and then the world went to total shit.
Yeah, all of these articles are all February 6th, and I don't see anything after that.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's interesting. Okay, well, I still think I'll still stick with Sebastian Berhalter because Jay doesn't appear to be gone yet, and also I don't want to think of another one.
It would be interesting. That's another thing with like I don't know what the rules and stuff behind here are, but I wonder if that would even be allowed. But
if he'd be permitted.
Yeah. I don't know what kind of involvement that has, but I feel like people don't like Jay, but I feel like Greg is I got to know Greg decently well, and I feel like Greg is a good man with good the best intentions for people. I would think that if he and his son had any say in things, then hopefully they would turn out well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, this is the problem you have when you make an incestuous, fucked up relationship between your national soccer team structure and your domestic league. So
yeah,
they deserve it, and fuck them.
I do love your idea of Wormgore, though. I keep picturing him sitting at the table and you're a Marvel. I know you've watched Marvel movies. I'm like when in the first Thor movie when he first gets to Earth and every time he finishes a drink he smashes the cup. It's just I'm picturing Vito doing the same thing.
Just drink. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, the funniest thing is if you follow him on Instagram, it's just nonstop videos of him playing with his 4 daughters. So he's probably the sweetest, mildest dude off the field that you'll ever meet, I'm guessing. But you look at him and you watch the videos of all his 2-footed tackles, and you're like, oh, no, I want him on my side when he goes to fight.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Oh, man. I think, okay. I like our answers. Those were good ones. Okay. Here, and so last but not least for today, we'll do our man balls. I have not thought about this at all. I didn't even think about the fact that we were going to need to do these.
I can go first if you want.
Yeah, why don't you go first?
Okay. My first one goes to Derek Etienne Jr. I almost don't even know what to say in the context of this. I'm sorry you had that experience because it's awful, but I'm also sorry that that's not the only time and that you're not the only person. This is probably my white guilt speaking. I'm sorry that was a thing, and you as a human being deserve better. But I also really appreciate that you came out and you talked about it and you lifted the conversation in the Columbus soccer community, because it is such an important conversation to have. So thank you for having the courage to share that with all of us. I really appreciate it, and you have my respect. My second man ball. See, I hadn't really thought about this.
Okay,
either.
Why don't you? Do you want to wait and go after me with your second one? Because I know I decided who I'm going to give mine to.
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to give one of my man balls to City Council President Shannon Hardin, and my other man ball to Congresswoman Joyce Beatty for getting out there and participating in the protests and ultimately getting frickin' pepper sprayed, which is insane that we literally had our city council president and a sitting congresswoman get pepper sprayed, and we only talked about it for maybe 12 hours, and nothing happened regarding it. There was no repercussions for those officers or anything. But I'm proud of them for being out there. I will admit that I didn't even vote for Congresswoman Beatty in the last election. I voted for her opponent, but she earned a lot of my respect, and I was really proud to have her as a representative after seeing her get out there, because this would have been very easy for her to have just done the same thing that a lot of politicians are doing, which is just tweeting about stuff from the safety of her home or her office or whatever. So it was nice to see both of them, despite being people in positions of power, getting out there on the front lines, and leading in a way that I want all of my leaders to do. So that's my two man balls.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and we should also say that, despite having lost, Joyce Beatty's opponent, Morgan Harper, has continued to be a voice in this. And
yeah,
she also could have just gotten mad and taken her ball and gone home, but she clearly has continued to be involved. I think she's been going to the protest. She's been talking to people. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The Kevin Boyce, the Franklin County Commissioner, was also with Joyce Beatty and Shannon Hardin at the time of the pepper spraying. So
yeah,
it was very refreshing to see elected officials. They could have put in a nominal appearance and run to the safety of their own homes, and they didn't do it.
Yeah, they left that to the mayor.
Yeah. The second one, I totally agree with that, but I'll mix things up just so we're not repeating ourselves. to every, I mean, obviously I have respect for everybody who's protesting, but specifically the people who are bringing out their cameras and recording the things that are happening so that the world can be aware of what's going on. You get my other man ball today. And frankly, this goes to professional journalists too, because I know there are dispatch reporters who are out there. There are lantern reporters who got pepper sprayed despite being legally allowed to be there as members of the press. So for everyone who's out there documenting what's going on and capturing examples of police doing wrong, thank you, because that's equally important. And maybe one of the things that will be the deal breaker or the difference maker this time is a video that gets on Twitter. You know, back in the civil rights era, you know, you had television and stuff may or may not have made it to the news, but the great thing about the internet is it's democratized everything. So if you're out there capturing injustices and abuses and sharing it at your own personal risk so that other people can see what's going on, thank you for that.
Yeah, it's a good one too. It's true. I mean, a lot of people are talking about it, but you know, this shit has been going on forever, and it's just now finally being, you know, shown the light and being addressed because there are cameras everywhere, and you can't do this kind of awful shit and not get caught now. So, yeah, I agree, Darby. I wish I could give man balls to everybody.
Yeah, world, I'd like to go ahead and give you a man ball. Just every person.
Well, yeah, not every person, but
yeah, no, not Morgan.
No, definitely not him. Rest. All right. Well, I think that's probably going to be the end of our show here. I don't think that we're not ready to resume weekly shows yet, Darby. Right? We're planning to hold off on that until there's actual play happening.
Yeah. We're in a holding pattern the same as the rest of the world. I'm definitely interested in talking about soccer related things when there are soccer related things to talk about. And hopefully this week we'll know more about what the future might look like as far as that goes.
Yeah, so I don't think we're in a place right now where we'll let you know when we're going to necessarily return, but hopefully we'll have a bit more info on what to expect from the league coming this week, and then we can tweet out kind of maybe a schedule for what we expect you guys can look forward to from us once we have that information. All right. Well, with that said, this has been another episode of ACES Radio. Perhaps not a very laugh-filled one, but one that I think was important and necessary, and we talked about a lot of crucial stuff. So hopefully you stuck around even though we weren't making you laugh. And thanks again for joining me, Darby. Is there anything last thing you want to say before we do the whispery thing that we do sometimes?
I'd like to point out that in our defense, people didn't laugh at our jokes before all this started happening.
That's true. Laughing at our jokes and laughing just like at us as creatures that exist is very different and very hurtful, I'd like to point out. All right. I'll count us down. Brent won't be here to ruin it this time. Ready? 3, 2, 1.
I don't know what to whisper.
Oh, damn it, Darby. Son of a bitch.
So we're just doing the normal thing? We're not doing a special thing? That's fine. I'm good with that.
Was there a special thing you'd like to do?
No, because anything after all this seriousness, if I whisper like boobs and farts, it seems a little, wrong. So we can just do the normal thing.
You see the thing I just typed in there?
All
right, let's do that. Ready? I'll count again. 3.
Wait, are we whispering or are we just saying it?
We could just say it. We don't need to whisper it.
Okay, because I don't want to whisper this.
Okay, we'll say it. 3, 2, 1. Black Lives Matter. I've already put in more effort than I want to with Brent.
His gigantic fucking head.